So what I'm trying to understand is like understanding archetypes. I'm trying to get more into Jung because I feel like he has a lot of interesting stuff to say in terms of like the psycho-spiritual perspective. Like, how do you interpret things? For example, like angels and demons, or entities, deities. How would you interpret this? And we can just begin with like angels and demons, for example, because that's been a theme for me as of late. Is like looking at mostly demons, to be honest. And I never intended for it to go that route, but it went down that route sort of by itself. In terms of material, I was being drawn towards, especially things like the Genesis story and like Lilith, and like looking at how demons really refer, at least from my personal perspective, how I'm understanding them, is all about the kind of the id and all the different kind of instinctual impulses, and taking them, see how they can be taken towards the worst possible kinds of outcomes, and how effectively how in society in day-to-day life we are constantly like transmuting those energies through fantasies, for example, through dreams, through fantasies. And demons aren't necessarily how people interpret them. They're not like, at least in the way I'm experiencing that kind of content, it's not like some scary being that appears. It's more like understanding, for example, things like greed or envy or sexuality, lust, things like this. And so how would you interpret things like demons and then things like angels? Because generally speaking, when people are talking about angels, they mean these beings with wings and celestial beings. But they read a bit more into like the biblical accurate angels. You keep finding like these themes of like fiery serpents, which then goes on to the next question, but I'll leave that for after. So what do you think in terms of like psycho-spiritual perspectives, and then things like angels and demons and deities? What's your reflections on that?
What is psycho-spiritual? Just so I'm clear.
What I mean, so in terms of like
transpersonal psychology, are you talking? What do you mean by psycho-spiritual?
Psyche, like the nature of the psyche, and looking at in terms of like archetypes. So, for example, like the deities as archetypes reflecting like different attributes, or angels and demons as well.
All of that within psycho-spirituality?
I would say in a sense of bridging the line between the mystical and the spiritual, and also understanding like the psyche, the human psyche, and the archetypal nature of the human psyche, if that's what I mean.
Well, the psyche is the psyche. Remember I said nothing is as it appears to be, right?
Right.
All I'm seeing is God. So anything that anyone brings up about the psyche, we're being specific in talking about the thing that's a part of the ego, right? But no ego is necessarily, remember what I said about nothing being real, but it's not what it actually means. So I have to be careful here when I say that the ego isn't real. I'll just say that the ego is not what it appears to be. All right. So from that standpoint, it's not what it appears to be. So when we get to demons and angels and things of that sort, I don't believe in demons and angels. They're not real from my standpoint. They appear.
Right.
Right. They appear. I've met them. Right. But that's not what they are. They're as you know, they're aspects of the mind. The mind will do anything to stop you from trying to reach absolute realization, and it will tempt you. It will throw things at you, because that's the goal of the ego. The ego's supposed to do that. The ego doesn't want to die, because to have an experience, the ego has to die. The ego doesn't want to die, so it's doing everything it can to survive.
Right.
That you don't try to kill it, so it will throw things at you, so that you'll get distracted and you'll be attracted or repulsed by what you're seeing. So a lot of people disagree with me with this because they haven't had God realization. So they will say, oh, demons and angels are real. Well, I'm not going to argue if they're real or not, because they're real from the standpoint of the ego. I don't disagree with that. But from the ultimate standpoint, they're just archetypes. They're just, right? And the thing is, too, if you took 10 people from 10 different cultures seeing the same thing, based on their belief system, they're going to see 10 different things. One person is going to see a being with 1,000 legs and 1,000 arms and 1,000 heads, right? Because that's based on cultural belief. Another one's going to see an angel, probably a white-skinned being wearing a white outfit with wings, and probably long hair and a halo over it. That's what they're going to see. Another person's going to see a monster-like type of being, but it's a being where the skin is, I don't know, has a trillion eyes in it or something. And the list goes on of all the different types of things they will see. They're all seeing the same thing, but because of their cultural influences, they're seeing the same thing in 10 different ways because it's 10 different interpretations. Not the same.
They all reflect, like, what is the fundamental meaning? Like, they reflect the same archetype. They reflect, what do they actually?
Yeah, they probably reflect the same archetype, but interpreted through my map of reality.
Right.
Right.
Then that brings me.
Nothing is as it appears to be. So if I see a demon, I don't interpret it as a demon. I interpret it as my ego or my mind creating images or whatever, and it's reflecting back to me because it may reflect something of my ego or something of my id. It may reflect that. So your job as an individual, as a seeker, if you're a seeker, is to stare at your demons until they turn divine. To keep staring at you. And what I mean by that, by staring at your demons until they turn divine, is whatever is happening, let it be okay. When you allow everything to happen and let it be okay, the demon will disappear. It doesn't mean the thing that's in front of you is gone. That's not what I mean. I just mean the way how you interpret it disappears. So with me, you can throw any demon at me, you can throw any angel at me. It's nothing to me. Yeah, I may feel some fear because that's my ego feeling fear. I'm not feeling fear. I'm the ground of all being. I created that. That's my creation. Mm-hmm. So I don't fear from that standpoint because there's nothing to fear. I'm the ground of all being. Morgan itself, who is facing it, may go through some fear. But Morgan knows that I'm just looking at a projection of my own id, my own inner being, as the ego, not as the ground of all being.
So what I mean,
I don't believe in demons. I don't believe in angels. I don't believe in entities. I don't believe in none of those things. I experienced them. I've done everything. I've visited them and done all kinds of stuff with them. But that's not how I'm seeing them when I'm in these spaces. And these spaces that I'm talking about has nothing to do with God realization. These are just peak experiences with astral traveling and all that type of stuff, which I've done years ago. I don't even dabble in that anymore.
Right. What I meant was, for me personally, my direct experience, I'm not experiencing actually, like, seeing anything, only with my eye in the imagination. But for me, I'm more interested in, like, what they mean. Like, that's where, for me, the psycho-spiritual stuff comes in, like the psychological interpretation. Like, what do they actually mean in terms of these archetypes, in terms of angels and demons, and whether you had any sort of understanding or any perspective, like what for you, what do they represent?
I don't really care about any of that because I don't study psychology on that level. I don't study transpersonal psychology. It doesn't matter what they mean because that has nothing to do with God realization. So I could entertain myself and look up what these archetypes mean, and even then, a psychologist is giving me their interpretation of what they think it means. Nobody knows what they mean, right? People are just giving their best educated guess based on trial and error, based on other people's experiences, and the ego is trying to define what these archetypes are. We just know that the archetypes exist, that it's a projection of the mind, and it's coming from out of view. That we know. But no one can really interpret for sure what they represent from that standpoint. But if you interview 1,000 people or 3,000 people, and you can be able to narrow it down to this is what it probably means, this is where it's stemming from, and there may be some truth to that. But I don't care about any of that because it has nothing to do with God realization. That's psychology. Now, one can learn psychology and become God realized. You can do both. But all that stuff to me is just distracting me from reaching what the goal is. Yeah, God realization, none of that stuff really, really necessarily matters. It's just entertainment. As long as you can indulge in it, as long as it doesn't distract you from the goal. Because of transpersonal psychology. I'm not against transpersonal psychology. I actually really, really like it. But again, it has nothing to do with me reaching the goal of God realization. They can become more distractions, more traps. As long as you don't get your intellectual mind to jump in the way and stop you from that pursuit.